G'day and welcome again to another Campfire Project panel discussion. And today I have with me Adrian. Say hello, Adrian, to the group.
Hi, great to be here, Alan.
And just give a quick little introduction to who you are and what you do, please.
Okay, so my name's Adrian. I'm currently living in Sydney. And just to give you a bit of a bio, I am 55 years young. I've got a blended family of 6 children. Eldest is 31, youngest is 18. Got 4 granddaughters. And I work as a life mastery expert and a coach, psychotherapist and counsellor. And I've been working with men in the men's space for about 22 years now.
Excellent. And then we also have Peter D. Catania from Queensland. At the moment you're down in Byron. Is that right, Peter?
Yes, it is. It's only roughly around an hour and 20 minutes from my house. So I come down to Byron and see my friends and chill out a bit.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
I've also got a blended family. My partner and I, we got 3 each, and we live just 25 minutes out of CBD of Brisbane, heading towards the Gold Coast. And I've always been interested in men's health or in men's health and all that kind of thing. So I had some issues over time with relationships, and I thought there must be some way of supporting other men that are going through similar things. So roughly about 4 years ago, I started a men's group online in Facebook called Men's Help Group Australia, and there's around about 600 members at the moment. It's growing slowly, but it's something that I really love and really enjoy, and I spend a lot of my spare time helping guys, because a lot of men are joining when they're at their wits end. They just don't know what to do. They've almost on the giving up scale. So it's interesting getting at that level, and but there's a lot of guys coming through that are professional and they want to help out as well. So yeah, it's a great cause, and it's good to know that there's that through your site, the Campfire Project, that there's other men with similar mindsets that really want to make a difference for men, because we need it, and we need it more than we think. So
that's exactly right. And the good thing about it is all those other groups are coming together and sharing their knowledge. So it's turning into a global community. Now, to all the listeners, and that if you go back to the beginning of the site, you'll see a post up there, a big thank you. And in that big thank you, I've actually got each of the interviews that I've done with all of these men. So go in and check Adrian and Peter out after this if you haven't seen those before, and get a good understanding of their backgrounds. Now, today in the panel discussion, the subject that had been brought up was what happens to our primal male energy when it's thwarted in any way. Where does it go? What does it become? And do we turn it against ourselves and against others? And that was a subject that had been sort of asked, whether we'd talk about that. But talking to you earlier, Adrian, one of the things that we realised we need to actually describe what primal male energy is in the first place. So what were your views on that?
Yeah. Look, for me, I think it comes in many levels, and it's about the physical, the emotional, mental, the spiritual, the sexual aspect of men. When we're in that raw state and in that primal state, but for me, that also has to be a very safe and conscious place as well. And I think often when people think of men being in their primal state, because of the current paradigm of the political situation around male, female, gender, there's often an attachment that when men are in that space, they're not safe. So I think that safety is such an important aspect of that as well, to know, just because we're being in our wildness, in our rawness, in our primal state, it doesn't mean to say we're not unsafe. It doesn't mean to say that we're going to go and attack or we're going to be outside our boundaries. I think that needs the clarity of what the primal state actually is. To put it into a simple language, for me, is about coming back to our core. Physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, sexually, and what does that mean for each of us individually, but also what does that mean to us collectively as men? And I think those questions we can start to pose and discuss hopefully today on this little panel.
Excellent. And your description of how you see the primal aspect there, Peter, what's your views on that?
Well, I've been challenged more times than I care to remember. And I probably word it a little bit different for me, because I haven't used that kind of terminology, but for me, it's always been about the fight or the flight, and having and making a choice about, are you going to stick to your guns or are you going to run to the nearest exit? You know what I mean? And it's how you stick to the guns. Do you stick it to your guns ethically and being responsible with your behavior, or do you just unleash the rawness? You know, or do you go, you know what, this is a bit much for me, I'm just going to take some time out, and the flight kind of thing. And it's not really flight, it's more go to the safe spot, you know, for yourself and take care of yourself, because really at the end of the day, we have a responsibility towards ourselves and to the people around us. I've been challenged so many times, but I think with it is it is definitely self-ownership of how you personally want to handle the situation at hand, and that takes, to me, a lot of emotional maturity. The corners is sometimes the other side. Like, I think, like you talk about the caveman side, you want to go outside and punch a punching bag, and that's going to help for a little while, but psychologically, you know, that's just getting rid of the energy. But psychologically, you're still going to have this parcel in your hand that you got to work with. You know what I mean? And so I think if you stick to your own morals as best as you can, I think that's going to help in the whole state of mind, and that primal kind of challenging state.
Yes, and as you said, you know, it's you have that energy, and you know, as you said, punch the bag or whatever and get rid of it. You're not really working on the source of the problem in the first place. You're just going to keep having to repeat that every day. After a while, that becomes exhausting, and whatever is behind you and that is caused in the first place is just going to get bigger. So now you've got to deal with that. So the way in which you deal with it is usually, or quite often comes out as being inappropriate. Doesn't really solve an issue. So what have you found that's triggered your primal energy in the past? What sort of things have happened or whatever, and how have you handled it? What advice would you have on that, Adrian?
Look, I'll come into the present time with that, Alan, in terms of that question. One of the triggers for me around that primal is the current political narrative around male, female, masculine, gender. Because there's a big push in the current political climate to, what I feel personally, is to take away that primal masculine energy. And I get quite affronted, but I go to quite a few meetings and presentations around that space just to see what the narrative is. And yeah, it is one of my triggers, because I think if we lose that, if we lose that primal gut instinct, native primal nature energy, I really wonder where humanity is going. I really wonder where the male-female energy is going. And I'm still quite a proponent of the masculine-female energy. I love to do that work. In my work, my wife and I have a very, you know, sort of, if you like, that typical masculine-feminine relationship. I love being in my masculine. She loves being in feminine. So, yeah, I do get triggered by some of the current political narrative.
I think, as you said before, when you asked me, we were talking about, well, maybe we need to describe what primal energy is, because most people, I think, have got an issue or don't really fully understand it. It's like all masculinity now has a word in front of it, toxic. It's almost like all masculinity is toxic in the way in which they're looking at which. And the problem is that toxicity has come from where the masculinity has been taken away from us. Like looking at the boys that are growing up without any good male role models in their life, they don't know what it is to be a man. And so when they're put under pressure, the negative side of that masculinity comes out. So have you found that in your work, Peter?
I've been working in challenging behaviours for about 15 years with when it comes to people with disabilities, and I found that I have to deal with a lot of aggression a lot, and it's definitely have to step back and just stop yourself and really breathe and not get caught up in it all. Because you want it, you kind of sometimes you want to run from it because it can be quite aggressive. And I don't handle aggression too well. Like, I find sometimes it kind of increases my energy levels somewhat, and I have to calm myself down and count back from 10 and do some breathing exercise, like stop. You got to stop yourself in that present moment, because you got to think you have a responsibility for yourself and for the people I'm caring for. So you just can't act you cannot act, you know, like a typical man around them. You can't do that. You got to be professional. You got to use different techniques. And it's hard stuff. Like I'm dealing with people that are self-harming. You know, there's a lot of blood sometimes, that kind of thing. So you really, you know, we have a lot of training around that, but some stuff doesn't prepare you for what you're going to see. Another thing with the whole toxic masculinity thing, I'm just looking at, like, I'm thinking, and I've always thought this for a long time, because I'm a man, but I'm not a blokey bloke. I'm not like I drink VB and drive a V8. You know, like, you know, do you know what I mean? Like, I can hang out with the boys and I really enjoy that, but I like hanging out with the females as well. And lucky for me, I've had a sort of strong feminine side that I've been able to have really good relationships with females. It doesn't make me less as a man. I think it probably makes me more of a man, to be honest. But I'm not afraid of having a feminine side at all. But on the other hand, I feel that, like, I've got 3 sons, and you know, two are identical twins, and they're 13 going on 14. And I have another little son, he's 5, and they watch you very closely, especially the little one. The older ones did their own thing now. But I find, well, you know, just because you're a man and you got big muscles and you got a lot of strength, it doesn't mean you have to use it. I really feel that just because you're a man, you don't have to prove it. You don't have to prove that you're a man. You can tackle things, you can work things out in a different way than using that brawn, animalistic. Like how easy it is just to go to the pub, drink 10 beers and go punch on and get your anger out that way, which happens a lot. You know, this one punch thing that's been happening a lot in the media the last few years. You know, a lot of people, you know, can't handle the masculinity, don't know what to do with it, and they either have issues with their father or issues with authority, and then all of a sudden they're punching people and people are dying, and it's really, really sad. It's really sad.
You know, I think, you know, when we were talking about when we put the campfire together in the first place, I talked about the difference between being a man and being the man. And those that want to be the man, well, it's high competition. You're always looking over your shoulder. The next guy is trying to knock you off your perch. It's always, and that's the blokey bloke, the one who wants to stand out in front of everybody else. Whereas being a man is somebody who stands comfortably in that next to everybody. Yeah, and I think they're far more complete than the man will ever be, because the man's, you know, really it's a life of fear, because somebody else is going to pass you at some stage. You got your 15 minutes of fame, and that's about it, because somebody else will be along that quick. But when you're a man, you've got your family, you've got other people around you. You're a real man. You've really got to be more than just the blokey man. You've got to be able to be that gentle side as well, because you're not complete until you've got all aspects. Like in
Alan, for me in that space, what I find to go and find that for myself is to go into nature. And I want to bring the question of that positive primal male energy back and connect it back to the root of nature, because that's really where we're talking about that primal male, primal masculine. It was more nature-based. And I took it enough 2 weekends ago to go down to the Snowy Mountains, and I had 2 days down there in my tent on the river, playing with ditch, sitting in the river, just, you know, being with me. And I know for a lot of men that's quite a fearful space to go out by themselves into nature for 2 or 3 days a week. And for me, that's when we come back to, or when I come back to that primal nature, is when I go out into nature. I go out for a week or a couple of days. And unfortunately, I think what we've lost in our male culture, and Alan and I, you and I have had this conversation a few times, is about initiation. We've lost that primal initiation of what it means to bring in that primal masculinity, so that we can hold ourselves, so we don't have to get into that fight or flight or whatever we do, but we can stay present and be in that raw primal space. And I think a big part of what's missing for us in this society is that we don't support or encourage other men to go and do that primal connection to nature. For me, it's essential. I do it. I just did it 2 weekends ago for 3 days in the Snowy Mountains, and it was incredible time.
Because that primal energy is a balanced one. It's, you know, people think primal, they're being aggression. I think that's what a lot of people think it is, but it's not. With initiation, it was always a process of really getting to understand yourself, your environment, everything else, and to be part of everything and part of the, you know, the tribe and around the other people. Girls still have it because they are able to talk to the other women. They talk to their aunties and all the rest of it, and they have their talk. But boys are always told for a long period of time, don't cry. Keep it all, hold it all down. we got isolated and without other men around, and we all learn not by what people say, but by watching what they do.
Yeah.
It's my favourite saying when I'm talking to people is, I can't hear a word you're saying because your actions are deafening. Their behaviours, you know, as I said, well, the words are worth 7% in a conversation, then you got everything else of the non-verbal. So the words are worth 7% and everything else is the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And if I can just share a little example of that,
Please.
Primal energy, because it brings back a memory. I take a group of people to Africa every couple of years for a 21-day spiritual journey, and I was in Africa, I think I've gone back about 6 years ago, and we're in Cape Town, and we're in this Interkai forest, and it's a beautiful place. And there were about 6 of us sitting there. It was a day-out adventure, and suddenly we heard the noise coming through the bush, and it was a big troop of baboons. And when they come through, they're pretty noisy, and what happens is a couple of scouts come through first, the males, and then the females and the young come through, and then the young males behind it come through, so there's a protection of the young. But then the great big, you know, blue-faced, big-ass, red-ass male comes out, who's like just the boss of everybody. And we're sitting down having a bit of a picnic, so they smell food, and suddenly this baboon starts walking towards us. Now, I'm the facilitator. I've got men and women in the group, and I had to find that primal masculine energy to face the baboon. And this baboon and I had about a 3 or 4 minute meeting. I can only say meeting, energetic meeting. And eventually he sniffed the air, looked at me, turned around and walked off with a troop. And it's probably the time where I could honestly say it's the most primal I've ever been in my male masculine energy. It was scary. It was vulnerable. It was powerful. It was everything that, and probably emotions I didn't even know I had. And 2 of the women in there said, Adrian, thank you. We were so scared of that baboon, and somehow you had a conversation with it, you held it, whatever language it was. And I'd say that's probably, I've had that experience a few times in different situations, but that one was probably more primal than anything else I've ever had.
And the difference is in that particular primal energy, it's extremely positive.
Oh, I think,
as you said, it's vulnerable and everything else, whereas it's not the primal energy that people think is aggression.
I don't think primal energy is aggression, full stop.
No.
I just don't. It's just been labelled that, you know, unfortunately, in our political times. I think primal energy is one of the most powerful positive energies that we as men can bring into our being. I love that.
So in that state, you're there, you're staring down and communicating with the baboon, as you said. You've got the women who are watching and everything else. They're seeing the protection and everything else that's there. There's so much going on in that one moment that's showing the full aspect of being a man in your total.
Absolutely, yeah. Not the man. Definitely not the man. I would have been bitten by a baboon if I'd have been the man, I'll tell you.
We wouldn't have you here today, I'd say.
No. It was they're pretty big beasts. They're scary, you know.
Yeah, I know when I've heard about them, they're quite dangerous as well. So you have to be putting out the right energy that gets that animal's respect in that moment as well. Otherwise, you would have been toast, as they say, you would have been done. So
absolutely.
Primal energy in that case came with a great deal of respect, not only with the baboon, but with the women who were observing that as well. They came up and thanked you.
Yeah. And I said to him afterwards, I was going to protect that sandwich for my life because the baboon wasn't here yet.
It must have been a good sandwich, I tell you.
Yeah.
I love that because it's not so much the sandwich, but the fact that it shows that we're using a lot of wrong terms with or looking at things and putting the wrong context on it. You know, like this toxic masculinity, putting that the word masculinity, primal. And we think of primal being, you know, warring factions and that sort of thing, tribes fighting with each other. And so I think that this has caused a lot of confusion. So that, you know, to have that primal energy and know when we've had it and feel really great in ourselves, that we feel a different essence that we haven't felt before, and then at the same time have somebody else call it to say that it's wrong to do, that's got to cause a hell of a lot of confusion within a lot of men.
Yeah. And there's only one answer for me: go bush. Go bush. You know, it's seriously, it's the bit that's missing. My wife will say to me, if I'm being a nong, which is sometimes a bit too often, she'll just say to me, Adrian, grab your ditch, grab your swag, go bush, see you in a couple of days, because she knows that's where I go and find myself again. And it's our thing. It's our safety place. It's a place to have some space for me. It's my place to reconnect. So, and I go primal. You know, it's like get out there in the water with my ditch, campfire. You know, like you've got behind you, and that's it. It's back to basics.
So, Peter, do you do something similar to that, or you have a different way of expressing and dealing with that energy?
I had the opportunity to take my 5-year-old son camping for the first time just on the weekend, and he's never been outside of the bedroom, if that makes sense. So, so you know, I had this tent, and we're trying to put this damn tent up that my sister gave me, and it took like a couple of hours to get everything ready and put the marquee up, and that night, and he was really he wanted to help, so he's helped me put the tent pegs in, and then he dropped the sledgehammer on his foot, so that was really good. And it was good about getting back to basics, and he really, really enjoyed it. But when things changed was when it was time to go to bed, but there's no lights, there's no, you know, it gets quite dark, as you know, when you go camping, so you only got this little lantern, and he had that, and he just couldn't go to sleep, and I should have kind of laid there next to him for a while. I thought, no, he's got to be able to, you know, so he had a little lantern. I said, listen, I'm just outside the tent instead of the campfire, and he managed to eventually, about an hour later, he managed to fall asleep. And I thought about it. I thought, well, maybe should I cotton wool him and just lay next to him, or should I just let him experience it for himself? And anyway, the next day we had off and we were packing up, and he was helping me packing up the tent, and I think he really, really enjoyed it. And you're talking about men being in their own space. Like I'm very, very social, but I love being on my own as well. Like I enjoy going. I could have stayed there another 3 nights on my own, but the rain was coming pretty heavy coming in through, so decided to come back and drive down to Byron instead. And I think it's about people being on their own, and if you can't be on your own and in your own space, why? What's the issue? You know what's wrong with being on your own, being a man, thinking about things, you know, not communicating with anyone, but just expressing your thoughts, looking at what you like. Like this morning, my mates and I, we went to the beach, and I had my longboard. I've only kind of just picked up the surfboard in the last few years, but I've only been out on the maiden voyage once. And so today I tried to get out there and be primal and get out there and start surfing. And you know, to my surprise, you know, I didn't even stand up once. I got up to my knees, and it was a challenge. It was a real challenge for me, because I'm learning all about the balance and all that kind of thing. And you got all these other guys surfing around you, and got girls in front of me standing up, and I'm thinking, oh, you know, so, you know, and Byron Bay is beautiful. You got beautiful people that walk around, you know, everyone's just gorgeous, you know, and it's a beautiful place to be primal, and I'll tell you that much. And if you cannot be, I think you really have to learn to be on your own, and to accept yourself for who you are, and look about what and feel what you like and what your dislikes are, and getting out there, like you said, and camping on your own and doing things like that, and having a relationship with yourself. Because if you can't have a relationship with yourself, I mean, what lucky you got to have it with someone else.
That's it.
You know what I mean? So I totally agree, and I wanted to go back with what Adrian was saying, where with the primal thing, he had an issue. He had all these, you know, monkeys or whatever was coming through, and it was about being instinctive. He used his instinctive nature to work out what he was going to do in that specific time. There was no time he couldn't fight or flight. He had to be in the moment, and he had to take charge, because he had, like himself, he had this whole group of people behind him, and he had to protect them in his sandwich, you know. So being instinctive, and being on your own and your thoughts, and making that conscious decision yourself without having the influence of, say, a woman nagging, or your kids, or this and that. Being your own man and making the decisions that are right for you and right for the situation.
That can be a real test of that. But as you said, being comfortable on your own, I think one of the best Christmases I had, my boys were all overseas, seeing the two of the boys overseeing their other brother over in Finland. And their mother had gone with them as well, so there was nobody else around at Christmas. I threw the swag in the car and went bush for 3 or 4 days, and just out there with the nature, reconnecting and getting my energy back and everything else. It was absolutely brilliant. So something that we need to be able to do is, as you said, if you have to have other people around you, there is a problem, and it's, you know, you're not complete. there's something that you're lacking. You're trying to get it out from other people. And that's not going to work. No. You need to be able to supply that to yourself. Like one thing, as my boys were growing up, I made sure that they respected women. As I said, if you don't respect women, then you're not going to have a good life. You're always going to be looking, having broken relationships. Yeah. And I said the whole idea of, as you're going up, not only are you doing that, but you're also going to learn how to cook, iron and sew. All of those things, so that as you grow up, when you find a woman, it's not going to be because you need her, but because you want her, that you're self-sustaining. And that was really important. I said, you've got to be men in your own right. Yeah. You know, boys grow up with mum these days, or they always have, and mum nurtured them all the way through. Then you get to a certain age and you go and find a girlfriend, and now you've got another woman looking after you for the rest of your life. Yeah. And that's where a lot of the men have gone wrong. No rite of passage, no male role models around them, and always being in a state of need. Yeah. And so how do they handle it when pressures come along?
Well, I'm finding through the men's help group that I'm looking after is that I'm finding a lot of men are suffering from really severe loneliness, and I'm thinking about why is it they're looking outwards. They're looking outwards about, you know, they're not healing the inside. You know, like there's if you. I mean, I've been through all that. I've been through severe loneliness, and I know why. It comes down to, I feel, you know, self-love, and it comes down to how we feel about ourselves. And like I said, if you're comfortable with yourself and all that, you can get lonely at times, but not to a point where, you know, I've been in a room where there's 50 people that I know, and it's the loneliness, your heart feels empty, and it's a horrible place. And I don't have those issues anymore. It's been many, 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 many years since I've had any of those issues. But I'm coming across a lot of guys that are struggling with loneliness, and that's something that I think would be good to talk about as well. Yeah. What's going on in this world that these men are so lonely is because they're looking outwards and seeing what they've lost, and they're looking at what they're, you know, they're not looking at inside to see what's really going on. I think, you know, like, I mean, some of us have been divorced, some of us have lost our family to, you know, passed away, and that can sometimes make us feel that way. But there is a lot of loneliness to the point where they're not living. They're finding it extremely difficult to cope on a daily basis.
And that's a major issue, and that loneliness is one of the biggest. Well, we look at men, you know, what's 25, 34 year age group is one of the highest suicides, and then men in their 50s and 60s and 70s. That's the next highest group around with male suicides. So obviously, you know, at that point, losing their job, you know, either through redundancy or retirement, loss of a partner. Kids grow up, and quite often relationships with the wife break up because the kids are now off their hands. They go, well, what now? They haven't got that relationship with themselves or with each other. So there is a lot of loneliness in those ages. And then how much does the primal behaviours, the negative side of things, really come out? Is there a way of taking it to a positive side? What's the way of helping those men forward?
Well, I think of a lot of it, just to build on what you and Peter have said, Alan, is about finding that purpose. You know, like, what is it for us men in terms of our vocation or earthly purpose, or whatever we want to call that, to have that core. And if we have that core of purpose, we actually then don't need anybody else around us, because we're on a mission. We're on that purpose. We're in our passion. We're in our vocation. I remember my psychotherapy teacher 20 years ago said to me, Adrian, if a man walks in your room and he's lost in terms of his vocation, everything else around him will be in tatters. So it doesn't matter what he brings to you in your room. Go back to the question of vocational purpose. And some of the most valuable advice I've ever had, because as soon as a man walks in my room, he might walk in and say, I'm depressed, or I'm going through separation. I always ask the question, are you in your purpose or your vocation? And if he says no, that's where I go.
You know, we know that
it's the thing, almost that is the primal aspect of us as men, is that passion or purpose or vocation.
You know, if we come back down to, get a bit of noise there. If we come back down to the energy side of things, and we know that, well, if you look at a man, he's made redundant. It's a massive loss, because as you said, his purpose is gone. If we go back to tribal times, what was a man's role? He was the hunter. You know, the wife was a gatherer and the one who nurtured the children and everything else. Most of the time it was a wife who fed the family, because going after the big game was quite often there was none around, or it was many days out looking for it. Yeah. But that was the purpose, was as a provider and everything else. So a lot of these men who are no longer employed, either through redundancy or now retired, go, what now? Where's my purpose? So when they lose that, that's a major issue.
Yeah, it's huge, because everything else falls apart at the seams as well at the same time. It's a downward spiral for many men, sadly. Yeah.
But isn't it like a double-edged sword as well? Like I look at my father. He's 80, and he will never stop working. He'll one day, just because he's on 100 acres out near Noosa. He's got a big farm, and I reckon one day he'll just walk down the farm and he won't walk back. But he's dove in his work. Like, I think he's avoided emotion for many years, and he's just dived. He's always worked 6-7 days a week, as far as I can remember. Like, is that a good thing to be, 99% on your focus and on your purpose? Like, are you running away from something?
Yeah, the purpose has got to have a reason for it.
Clarity of purpose and vocation. For me, a job, a job, is very different than having a vocation. Really different.
Yeah. Well, look at what I do, and that my stuff is quite emotional. I'm working with people all the time. They're talking about their relationships with their children, with each other. My whole business is based on building relationships. So I'm to that age where I am past retirement age, but there's no way in the world I'd ever retire.
Could have fooled me.
I love what I do.
Could have fooled me. You don't look it.
But I really enjoy the people around me, because I just watch the aha moments that they're getting, and the way they change in their relationships, the way they're talking to their children completely changes. And they go from looking at their child who might be a noisy little monster as far as they're concerned, to now realising the noise they're making might have a musical trait to it. And here's might be a child prodigy, musician, composer, that sort of thing. And when they look at the gifts their children have got and communicate with them, there's no way in the world I'll ever retire.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of going down to the farm, back of the farm, and then not coming back for me. I'm going down to my enjoyment, and if I don't come back from my enjoyment, I'm okay with that as well.
No, I mean, like, he's going to be that old that he just won't be able to make it back up the farm again. Like, he's just going to walk down. And and I questioned my father about it. I said, are you ever going to retire? He goes, no. Why? He goes, Peter, I go down to the yacht club, and there's another, like, we're all similar age, and another one's dropped off the perch, and another one's dropped off the point. And he goes, you know why, Pete? It's because they don't have a purpose. They're bored stupid. And he says, I love what I do, and da-da-da-da. So there was that side of the coin where I'm relating to you, Adrian, where his farm is his life. It's where his focus is, and he's noticed that the men around him, around his age, late 70s, 80s, early 80s, they're all dying off because they haven't got the purpose, is what you say. So that's why I said about the double-edged sword. Saying where one side it's been fantastic because he's still alive and he's still there for us. But on the other side, I don't think he's ever really been there emotionally, for the family,
Yeah. Well, it turns into a different type of, what would you call it, social life. You're now attending a lot of funerals. So you can look at it from positive on that side, but the whole thing is you're looking at it and going, well, it's not my funeral again. So and that's the whole thing. You lose purpose. You've got no reason to, inside you have a feeling there's no reason to live. And that seems to be the stats. Quite a few years ago, the stats were that people would die, men in particular, would die 2.7 years after they retired. That's how long they would last, on average.
Wow.
So, and then when they put the retirement age up, I thought, we're going to have a lot more older men, because that's going to 2.7 years again, retire at 65, or 2.7 years after the age of 70.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have a lot of men living for an extra 5 years, but only if they're loving the work that they're doing.
Exactly.
Otherwise, the work they're doing is killing them. At the moment, I believe the stats are that 87% of people are disengaged in their employment.
Yep.
So they don't want to be there.
I can understand that.
Yeah. And that's got to be pulling them back. And there's another reason why so many men that we meet each day, especially you guys in your line of work, is that they're in that state. Yeah. They don't enjoy the work they're doing. They quite often don't have a job that matches their personalities. They've got managers who don't know how to connect. There's no leaders amongst them. It's only managers. Because management's all about doing getting the right thing done, getting things done, whereas a leader is about how you do it all.
Yeah.
It's a paper trail for the management.
Yeah.
So they're the issues that we're actually having. And I'm thinking that negative side of the primal energy is coming out a lot more under those situations. So we're seeing a lot more of it in the workplace.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, in terms of our context of our narrative, in that, Alan and Peter, is keeping that primal language as a positive, rather than calling it sort of positive and negative primal, because I don't think primal is negative. Is there another narrative, another word or phrase we can find that is the polar opposite to primal positivity? And it could, because the word toxic masculinity, I mean, it's so embedded in everybody's brains now. It's actually become a useless phrase in many levels. So I'm just wondering, in terms of our space here, what the opposite to positive primal energy is, and whether we might not get the answer now, but maybe we can question men listening in. So we can get a bit of a Facebook thing happening where we go,
get some feedback on it. Be brilliant.
What would the opposite be to primal positive language?
Yeah,
it's probably different for everyone. Sorry, Alan. It's probably what that is for each, could be individual for each person.
And this would be the good thing, because if people would actually write in and say what their view of it is, there's no right or wrong, as you said. It's what each people thinks. But along that, we start to get an understanding. Yeah. It's like the negative, what they call it, toxic masculinity. There's also toxic femininity. So why don't we just lump the whole lot together and call it toxic behaviour and get rid of the masculine and feminine out of it? Because
they've got to blame someone.
But we've got the hashtag out there. It was, first of all, it was Me Too, then it was Men Too. But all those are creating new fractions, new groups, and therefore more separation. That's why you'll notice the hashtag I use is We Together. Yeah. Because that encompasses everything. So the same thing, if we look at behaviour, let's just take if we're going to have equality, take the gender out of the behaviour and just call the behaviour what it is. Toxic or beneficial or whatever, so that we're no longer doing this gender stuff. And then we can start looking at, when we talk about primal, because there'll be primal female energy as well as there'll be masculine or male energy. But then we can actually start looking at going, okay, let's not put an adjective on the primal energy. Let's not call it positive or negative. This is what it is, but what is behind that? What's the positive aspect? So we can get away from using the word primal or, putting over a meaning on primal. Because like the word consequence. Remember when we were growing up, if we did something wrong, our mum would tell us that, well, the consequence of doing that is when your dad gets home, he's going to give you a slap up the side of the head. So consequence was all of a sudden a dirty word. It was a negative. We knew there was a smack coming because of it. But consequence just means if you do one thing, you'll get that result. If you do something different, you'll get a different result. It's just the cause and effect. It doesn't have a polarity. But we gave it a polarity. And as you were pointing out, Adrian, that's virtually what we've done with the masculine energy as well.
Well,
primal energy.
Well, you're 100% right, Alan. It's not about the sex. It's about the behaviour, and anyone can choose to behave a certain way, and that behaviour, whether it's toxic, whatever it is, it's definitely a choice. So it doesn't matter if you're male, female, or whatever you want to call yourself these days. Because the world's changing so quickly. But yeah, it is actually, you're 100% right. It's about the choice and behaviour, and if you choose to be toxic, it's not whether you're male, female, or a four-legged dog. It's your choice in how you choose to treat people, or treat the public, or blurt yourself out on social media of whatever's on your mind.
It's like the terms we're using at the moment, boys we boys, and that's a bad thing. Well, as I said in one of the other talks, and that they're not trucks, they're not camels. Boys are boys. Yeah. By definition, that's what they are. But we've given that now, because of the way it's being used, that is now a bad thing. Yeah. So all of a sudden, we've demonised all our boys immediately, which is a real problem as well, which then affects the negative side. That wrong sort of energy is going to be coming out of our boys because they're lost. Yeah.
Well, the last week or so, one of our members put up that Gillette commercial about behaviour in boys, and they should have stepped in, and then it's really raised a lot of eyebrows all around the world. And Gillette's doing it. It's a big marketing thing, and obviously negative attention or positive attention, whatever it is, there's still attention. And just the men, what they'll, you know, questioning masculinity with men. And I'm thinking, well, like I said, the old argument was you don't have to be masculine to be a man. You know, it's a choice of how you behave and how you think. For example, I choose to be a real man. Sometimes I hop on my Harley and I put all my levers on, and I put, you know, I play dress ups for the weekend, and I go out and I act like I'm this big tough bikie, but I'm not. I'm just wearing the outfit for that moment in time, you know. So that's quite enjoyable.
And there's so many aspects to us on there in terms of that archetype and the beings we are. We can be so many things and so many times and so many in 1 hour or 3 hours. We can be 5 different energies of masculinity or male, and it's about identifying that positive rawness in that, in terms of, you know, getting back to that primal energy of what that actually means for us. And getting on a motorbike, pretty primal. It's like getting on the back of a horse, you know, getting out there with the wind in your hair.
Yeah.
Great primal feeling. So how do we encourage men to get back into that primal feeling, you know, so they can actually experience some essence of being primal? I think it's been lost in terms of the modern technical age. You know, sitting in an office with air conditioning is not very primal. Now, Alan's got a perfect primal picture behind him. Water, fire.
There's no fire.
I like
Can't
Adrian.
go past that in terms of primal.
Adrian, I've got a exercise for you to do. There was Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan were in this movie called Joe versus the Volcano, and pretty much what it's about is they both worked in this office, and they had the fluoro lights, and it was just flashing in their eyes every day, and like you explained, and they just end up going on this trip, and they got shipwrecked, and they ended up on this island, and it's amazing. It's like it just made me think of you, and so yeah, get that movie in there and have a Joe versus a Volcano. You'll love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I love to see, someone giving someone else in the panel a bit of homework to do. Good way. And it's good that Adrian's also given a bit of a challenge to the listeners here today as well. You know, put your ideas up on how you see primal and everything else. What words do you think we should use? And by the way, there is no right or wrong answer on that. This is a discussion. Everybody has a right to their opinion. So, you know, answer the comments, put them up there and share your ideas, and then tell us how you'd like to see some more of these discussions go. Because the whole idea is it's not just to have a talk fest, it's to actually share ideas and also share stuff that other men can connect with. Yeah. It's one of the reasons why I've always maintained that anybody who came onto the panel discussions had a chat with me first of all. We did that, that everyone else could really, it was recorded, they could watch, so that men could actually listen to who you are and connect those that connect with you, and that they've got a real reason for then coming onto the panel and listening to that as well. So if they have a need out there that they've resonated with you, well, who should they go and have a chat with? Somebody you've actually connected with, somebody you have a bit of a bond with. And that's one of the reasons for these panel discussions as well. But it gives everybody who's out there listening to this the opportunity, and this is the women as well who are in the group, to put your comments up there, and that always being respectful, that's always been the rule here. But ask your questions, what you'd like to know, etc., and see if we can then take this discussion further and develop it so that we actually get a lot of value out of it. That'd be great if you can all do that. But time's moving on here, and I can feel the fire behind me there. So thank you everybody who's come along today, and to Adrian and to Peter, really appreciate your input.
Yeah, fantastic. That's great.
And I've loved the panels as well, because some of the guys that have been on the panels now are already talking to each other and doing things together as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm really loving the way everybody's been taking ownership of this, and it's becoming their group. So,
yeah, well, I've got a new coffee made in Byron Bay now with Peter, so that's great.
That's right.
Because Adrian moves up there shortly, and you'll be right when you come back down from Queensland, Peter. You'll be laughing.
I've got some good contacts here for you, Adrian, in Byron, that I'd love to introduce you to. Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I lived in Byron for 9 years, so I love the community there.
Excellent.
One of my friends here is a doctor of natural medicine. He's an acupuncturist, and I think he's done every sort of kind of counselling kind of thing that you can do is just master it. He's a fantastic guy, so I love spending time with him.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let's have a chat after we've finished up on that. Alan's fantastic little campfire meeting.
Everybody who's been watching this, you can see what happens when the guys start talking together as well. Get in and be part of it as well. Connect with them, ask your questions, and let's hope that everybody can get a lot more out of these talks. So thank you guys for being along today, and thank you for everybody who's been watching in as well. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan.
You're welcome, Alan. Thanks, Adrian.
Catch you later.